Hi, this is my UDK scene for Zbrush 2 for University. I based this scene off a concept art by Chris Ocampo. During the sculpting, I initially looked at the Eat 3D hard surface technique tutorial. Thanks to these, I had a pretty good understanding of hard surface techniques using Zbrush. After this, I looked into artists like Mehroke, Kevin Johnston, and a person called Sneffer on Polycount. I analysed their hard surface work in Zbrush and used it to influence my sculpting. The main tools used in the sculpting of the assets were Clip Curve, Extract, Inflate, the hard surface polish brush, Trim Dynamic, and the downloaded Orb Crack brush. These all provided a much cleaner and harder finish than the standard brushes. A lot of alpha stamps were used for the finer repetitive details like bolts and rivets. I completed the retop, unwrap and projection and made my first attempt at hard surface diffuse textures. After that failure, I performed quite a bit of research following the Ted Davis hard surface texture painting DVD that I got from the library, going over Greg's lecture notes on texturing and hard surface, and looking at how other artists have accomplished their pieces. I found two artists on Polycount, Polygoo and Nate Broach, that had produced some great examples of hard surface work. I then went through their threads to see their workflow, their progression, and how they developed their pieces. From this, I developed my own suitable workflow. I also used some of the stock metal textures from Greg's tutorial zip that he got from cgtextures.com. After the normal bake, all the assets were added into the UDK scene with basic lighting for the week 6 milestone deadline. When the textures were also finished, the real engine work began. I knew I wanted to use a multi-sub-object material for the wall sections to save on UV space and make it easier to have the brick texture tile across multiple assets. Marcus McCormick has a simple tutorial for this posted on YouTube. The emissive sign material and projected hologram effects were created by using separate floated meshes and animated shaders. CG Tuts Plus has a good screen tutorial, but I also used the Mastering Unreal Technology Volume 1 book to gain a better understanding of the standard material functions. The emitters in the scene are not mine. They are the standard emitters included in UDK, as is the pouring rain material on the planes around the scene. The reflections on the floor use a Scene Capture Reflect Actor from the DX9 renderer. I did try and use the image-based reflection actor from DX11, but I found having to position each image actor was a lot less efficient because of the amount of reflections needed and all the overhanging construction of the building. The flowing rain on the curb was inspired by the UDK foliage demo map, however I could not mimic the complexity of theirs, so I created a much more basic version using the UV coordinates instead of using the world position parameters. I also tried using a bump offset modifier in my curve shader, but the effect on the alignment of the textures was too drastic, so I had to remove it. The skybox is downloaded from Julio Juarez. I used the editable parameters in the material constant to turn the sky into night, but the work is not mine. I used it because it has a good overcast look and is customizable. I did a very faint lightning overlay to imply a more stormy night than it actually portrays. The problems on in my map are a curb mismatch. There's no mid-section of the curb, so that it's not fully tileable, as can be seen on the left-hand building around the corner. There's also quite a few geometry holes, seeing as the roof sections don't have an underneath, so separate meshes were inserted to fill that gap. Future improvements I could make would be to improve the running water material on objects like the curb, adding in more clutter and decoration as is in the concept, and to make the scene look generally more lived in and worn. I could also add variations in the tiling wall sections so that the tiling isn't quite as obvious. Things like lampposts and other objects like that. Also moving objects, so flapping fabric and such. Another good thing to do would be to replace all the UDK owned actors in the scene with actors that I make myself. Things like all the emitters and the rain pour material on the structural actors. finally, combining all of these together, I could potentially make a large scene that would be either actually playable, which the scene isn't at the moment, or could be a very good set piece just for aesthetic purposes, such as the scene Hyzior has on YouTube. I believe the scene has turned out well. The one response I got from Polycount mentions that the colours work well together. I tried to construct the light so that it reads well from any angle. There should be a flow of highlights for the eye to follow. I also like the quality of the individual assets and think that their style is consistent across the whole scene. I think that some areas are still too light. It doesn't look like night time, and it washes the scene out a bit. There are also a lot of pulsing signs. When I first set out to create the scene, I wanted a Times Square Las Vegas feel with all the lights and all the advertisement, but I think I went a bit too far with including the windows in that. They just ruin it a bit and make it all seem a bit too garish. If it were to be made again, I think I would put a lot more effort into the concern of the tiling wall, changing it a bit so that it looks less copied and pasted and more like structurally economical, so that it's more believable that it's repeated. My personal progress for this project has been the hard surface work, seeing as I've never really done hard surface in Zbrush or Photoshop. In this project I strive to make almost all my 3D work in Zbrush to gain more experience in the program. Finally, the scene was constructed with industry restrictions in mind. Almost none of the assets individually go much over 1,000 tries. The largest asset is the bottom corner wall piece, and that only measures in at just over 1,000 tries. This limit is very conservative considering the current generation poly allowances. If it weren't for the animated materials, the animated skybox and the HD emitters, the poly limit of this scene could lend itself to a high-end mobile map.